Right, I want to bring you some breaking news because the United Nations Human Rights Council is holding an urgent meeting on the burning of a Quran, which took place in Sweden last month. The meeting was requested by Pakistan. So let's have a listen to what they have to say.
The freedom of opinion and expression. We look forward to adopting a draft resolution on countering religion hatred, constituting incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence in order to consolidate the principles of human rights. To conclude, we'd like to stress that freedom of expression is an ethical value that should spread peaceful coexistence rather than causing clash of civilizations. We should spread the values of tolerance and put an end to all practices of hatred and discrimination. The universal culture of peace and tolerance can only be built through concerted international efforts to ensure the respect for everyone in all societies. Peace be upon you all.
Thank you. Now let me invite Pakistan, His Excellency Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Pakistan, through video.
Mr. President, High Commissioner, Excellencies, I thank the Human Rights Council for holding this urgent debate. 3 months ago, we observed the first International Day to Combat Islamophobia, where in our capacity as OIC Chair, we had the privilege to co-chair, along the UNSG and the UNPGA, the first ever session to mark the occasion of the UN General Assembly. Unanimously, we all spoke with one voice in condemnation of Islamophobia. Unfortunately, the deliberate desecration of the Holy Quran has continued under government sanction and with a sense of impunity. Increasingly, these acts are designed to maximize provocation. We must see this clearly for what it is: incitement to religious hatred, discrimination, and attempts to provoke violence. We must join hands in condemning it. We must isolate those who stoke hatred. Mr. President, the Holy Quran is a spiritual anchor for 2 billion Muslims. It is inseparable from their sense of identity and dignity. It is important to understand the deep hurt that a public and premeditated act of the Quran's desecration causes to Muslims. It is an attack on their faith. The call in the draft text before this Council for prevention and accountability is therefore reasonable and necessary. In making this call, I'm not losing sight of the fundamental right of free speech. Free speech is as indispensable as hate speech should be indefensible. Our vigor to protect free speech must not lose sight of the imperative to reject hate speech. There is not a single Muslim country on the planet that allows for the desecration of holy texts of other religions. Such an act is unthinkable to any Muslim. It is forbidden by faith, by culture, and by law. It is in the same spirit I resolutely stand alongside those who are calling for prevention, legal deterrence, and accountability of actions that constitute incitement and hostility against people of faith. Mr. President, let us unite against hatred, discrimination, intolerance, and forge pathways for mutual respect, understanding, and tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Qatar, His Excellency Lolwach Rashid Al Katir, Minister of State for International Cooperation.
موافقة مجلس حقوق الإنسان على
At the outset, we welcome the unanimous agreement of the UNHRC to convene this urgent debate, which addresses an important topic that falls within its mandate, namely addressing religious hatred, which constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, and violence. We condemn in the strongest terms all public incidents of burning copies of the Holy Quran, especially those that took place in a number of European countries. At the time when the whole world is facing daunting challenges, we have selective standards. Anti-Semitism, for example, can be addressed. A number of countries magnify what happens to minorities and magnify what happens to others. and they call upon other countries to change the methodology. Mr. President, this important session is an opportunity to shed light on religious minorities all over the world that is not limited to a certain region. In European countries, many practices and laws do not respect racial diversity, including Muslims. Another problem that Muslims face in Far East is discriminatory practices, where we have a confusion of ethnic and religious discrimination, which may cause the death of people. In Qatar, we call upon these countries to take national measures to address the said and to hold perpetrators accountable and to prevent recurrence. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you're just joining us, what we've been watching is the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is currently holding an urgent meeting on the burning of the Quran, which took place in Sweden last month. We heard a little earlier from the Pakistan's representative, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Bilawal Bhutto. Pakistan, one of several countries who actually has requested this meeting from the Human Rights Council, the UN Human Rights Council, and also demanded an international response. We also heard there from Qatar's representative, the Ministry of State of Cooperation. Let's speak to our correspondent, Rory Challens, who's been following this story. Before we talk any further, give us a little bit of background to what exactly happened about a month ago in Sweden when this Quran was burnt.
So essentially, an Iraqi Christian immigrant burns a copy of the Quran outside a Stockholm mosque during Eid al-Adha. It was an incident that basically caused a significant amount of outrage around the world, particularly in Muslim countries. There was widespread condemnation. The Swedish embassy in Baghdad was briefly stormed by angry protesters, followers of the Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Muslim countries such as Pakistan urged Sweden to enact a ban on the burning of the Quran. The Swedish government came out and said that it did strongly reject the Islamophobic acts committed by individuals in Sweden and added that this in no way reflected the opinions of the Swedish government. But essentially, doing this thing, burning a Quran, is not illegal under Swedish law. The police have tried to stop planned burnings of the Quran or any other book, but the court said no, that this is protected as part of Sweden's free speech legislation. There are those in Sweden who say that this crosses over free speech into hate speech, which is illegal, but at the moment the Swedish courts aren't supporting that perspective. At its heart, really, this is one of those repeated clashes that we have seen over many, many years, this tension between the laws in some European countries which enshrine free speech as pretty much sacrosanct, even when it might offend the beliefs of religious minorities within that country, versus the beliefs in many Islamic countries around the world, perhaps more conservative ones, that hold up certain items such as the Quran as being absolutely holy, and therefore any desecration of them is considered blasphemous. We've seen this time and time again, and it is going to continue.
OK, thank you for that. Rory Challens there for us in London.